Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with a scene that feels like something out of World War II, and Putin's missiles wreaking fresh destruction and horror. This time at a railway station in the Donetsk region, where scores of people, including children, are dead after 2 rockets hit as thousands were trying to evacuate. A day before the airstrike on Kramatorsk railway station, a Ukrainian MP shared this video. As you can see, this was an area packed with civilians attempting to flee the war, including children and the elderly. John Sparks of Sky News was on the scene shortly after the attack, with a close-up of one of the missiles and the haunting message written in Russian that was discovered on it.
Just to focus on the words on the side of that missile, za deti, it means for children or for the children. Explosives from that missile have dropped here. Just remember that there will have been hundreds of people queuing up to get inside the train station. We've seen it. And they would have been killed, a lot of them. Terrible damage here. There's also blood. There's a small crater here you can see, probably where the explosives hit, punched a small hole in the platform. This would qualify as a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. This is an attack on civilians, clearly an attack on civilians.
Russia has denied carrying out the attack, with its defense ministry calling Ukraine's accusations a, quote, provocation. Joining me now from Lviv is Ali Velshi, host of Velshi here on MSNBC, and Maxime Borodin, a Mariupol city council member. And, you know, Ali, we seem to be reporting on what appear to be war crimes every day at this point. What is the point at this stage of Russia's denials, because no one's listening?
Actually, some people are. That's the problem. In fact, I had a conversation with a number of young people here in Lviv whose parents all either live in Crimea or Russia, and they're buying all of this stuff. Russia not only denied responsibility, but they came up with 2 different theories of why the Ukrainians were actually responsible. One is that it was a provocation. It was meant to get the West to give Ukraine what it wants in terms of weaponry. And the other one is that it was a Ukrainian-launched missile that didn't hit its target because it's very close to the line of control, if you will, between the Russians and the Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine. Both of those arguments are nonsense, but so are the arguments about how the Ukrainians killed their own civilians in Bucha. It is having some impact. It's having impact on Russian citizens. It's having impact in conspiracy theory circles in the United States. And remember, there are still some very, very powerful and populous countries in the world that are still on Russia's side of this thing. India and China, the 2 most populous nations in the world, are not pushing back on Russia. So the bottom line is they do get something out of denying this. I will say this, though, on the Ukrainian side, it only gets people more frustrated and perhaps more motivated for Ukrainians to do everything they can to win this war. And they are prepared to do it, but they cannot do it without the weaponry that they are requesting from the West, and they cannot do it without the cutting off of oil supplies from Russia.
You know, Maxime Borodin, I want to get your response to that, but we're going to show this missile again. This is the missile, Sky News. This is the imagery, and there it says "for the children" or "for children" written in Russian on it. When you hear that, you know, the Russian government is still lying and trying to blame Ukrainians as if Ukrainians would slaughter their own citizens, their own people, and just to blame Russia, how do you feel when, as you know, Ali said, some people are listening, even in this country? I mean, on another network, the most popular host on that network said that it's childish to portray the war in Ukraine as a simple battle of good and evil, when what I'm looking at is evil. And he doesn't seem to see it that way. And he's telling, you know, 2-3 million people a night that. I wonder how frustrating that is for you.
For me, it's horrible to see these scenes because I'm sometimes monitoring the Russia state TV channels and look what they're showing to the Russians. And it's they blaming Ukrainian soldiers that then they are in the answer what is done with Mariupol. They said that it's not Russia who destroyed Mariupol with bombs from their planes. That Ukrainian military is blaming for because they don't give up to Russians. If they give up, it's Mariupol is still be nice. It's horrible to hear this, and it's always the tactics of the Russians. Remember the MH17? It's the same tactics. At first they say they shot down the plane, and then they said it's not us. The same situation with Kramatorsk. At first they said in their public, in the Telegram channels, they said it's we hit on the Ukrainian soldiers. And then they deleted these messages and say it's Ukrainian soldiers make these terrible things. It's always the tactic of the Russia. And the truth is there are no stop to killing civil people in Ukraine and in other European countries before we stop the Russia. If the Western side is don't make a real strong sanctions, not with the steps, but all at once, gas and crude oil, all the things which Russia are selling and getting money for the war. And if Ukraine side don't get real weapons, jet planes, special systems, modern systems, not all systems, because if we don't get, the war continues and more people die. How much peaceful citizens need to be killed to politics understand that they are not statistics, that someone children, someone friends, someone parents. It's not only statistics, not numbers, it's people.
Let me play for you. Actually, very quickly, Ali, I want you to respond to that because we talked about this yesterday, and we're so blessed to have you in this world and reporting for us because you're a finance guy, you're an econ guy, in addition to being just a brilliant reporter overall. This is the thing I don't understand because. As Mr. Borodin has said, they could simply cut off the oil. And I get it. Russia needs that. No one wants to pay more for petrol in Europe. But it seems to me that if you're not cutting off the oil, you're not all the way serious. There are mass graves in Bucha. You can see it. They're there. And if that doesn't move you to say, whatever we have to do, we're cutting off the oil. Why do you suppose they're not doing it?
Yeah. Well, there's three problems. One is just plain old politics, right? Nobody wants to have their people pay more for gas and get thrown out of office, which in Europe is actually a real possibility. Right-wing parties are surging. You saw, again, another victory for Viktor Orban in Hungary the other day. We're looking at elections in France. So that is a real issue. The second part is people are getting fatigued. They're getting tired of it, right? It's easy to look away. You're tired of seeing the death and the destruction. It's horrible. So people choose to look away and say, all right, you know what, this is going to drag on for lots of years. I don't know what I'm supposed to do about it. And the third problem is, let's say, and the Baltic states have cut off their oil imports from Russia, but let's say everybody in Europe actually does it. India's not doing it. And China's not doing it. These are countries that are consuming more and more gas, oil, and coal every day. Russia can create an entire system around the world with the republics that they control, the countries that they influence, like Georgia and Chechnya and the Central Asian republics, and India and China and any other rogue nations that want to buy their oil a little bit cheaper or their coal a little bit cheaper than world prices. So it's really got to be a globalized effort to say not just the European Union and NATO and the United States, but then those countries have to put pressure on other countries to say, you will ruin your trading relationships with Europe and with the United States if you continue to back channel your support for Russia. Russia makes most of its foreign currency off of oil, coal, and gas. If that stops, if that really gets cut off, Russia will be hobbled. But until then, Russia can keep on going.
Too bad we don't live in a modern world where you could come up with some other way to fuel cars and planes and trains. Oh, and that's right, we do.
Right.
You could literally come up with new technologies, but this addiction, crack addict-like addiction to oil all around the world and refusal to pay attention to climate change, turns out it's also allowing evil to thrive. Let me play Volodymyr Zelensky. He's going to be on an interview with him is going to be featured on 60 Minutes this week.
We are defending the right to live. I never thought this right was so costly. These are human values, so that Russia doesn't choose what we should do and how I'm using my rights. That right was given to me by God and my parents.
What did you see in Bucha?
Death.
Просто смерть.
Just death.
Death, just death. Maxime Borodin, this is the reality for Ukraine right now. Ukraine is essentially paying in blood for the world's refusal to stop using oil. It's horrible that it sort of comes down to that. What would you say to these countries that are saying we can't find any alternative? We've got to buy the oil.
I don't have words to say. What to say to the people in these countries today? They think they're in safe position, that the war is far away from them, but it's not like this. Russia is not possible to stop without a war. If they continue to Europe, and the problems is even now Europeans see how many peoples they go out from the Ukraine, women and children, and Europe need to react to this situation. And if it go further, the problem is more bigger. And another problem is Ukraine is make a lot of wet, and with this war, a lot of countries have impact on their food supply. So it's not only about Ukraine; it's about all civilized world. And if the West today is starts to ignoring this problem, and people start to to look away from the problem, so problem not going anywhere. It's still here, and it's moving forward to the war.